Thank you for having us and showing us your space.
Of course. I'm happy that you're here.
I'm so excited, and I'm actually very relieved that we're not doing a live, because last time I interviewed Melissa, I almost accidentally switched on the Bernie filter.
Oh my God.
She doesn't know that, but she'll know that now.
Oh
so I'm
gosh,
really relieved
so funny.
that we're doing a studio.
I would have accepted it. I would have rolled with it.
All right, just give us a little introduction.
Sure. To me, my studio space. All right. So this is where I now paint. I actually was in a different studio space down the hall for the last couple of years. And as the paintings grew, I kind of ran out of room. So I relocated to this bigger
To something
studio space.
bigger.
Something that could accommodate the paintings, which is now also starting to feel small.
Now you're a third year grad.
Yeah, third year.
And your show is coming up soon.
May 21st.
Now, just so you know, if you don't follow Jess on Instagram, you really need to, especially if you're a painter, because she's active and she's inspiring.
Stop.
And just the joy that you get out of it is a pleasure to see. So yes. I'm going to make sure that we have your handle down there.
Yay,
yeah. So let's see your space.
Yeah. So this is my studio on a clean day. I clean just for you, Melly.
Oh.
I usually have a couple big different things going on at one time.
Now, is this like a note?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I always joke that I'm the most type A non-objective painter that you'll ever meet, because for something that's supposed to be so intuitive and process oriented,
right,
I find when I'm not working, I'm constantly thinking about it and trying to find things that link the work together. So this is essentially a collection of thoughts that I have had over the last 2.5 years that I've been putting together, and that I have to kind of look back and remind myself of.
So in a way, is it like a vision board?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a vision board, more of like me trying to get the common thread that ties my work together in order, because I do have to write my thesis this year.
That's
and
right.
I know a lot of artists can relate to this in a way that art's a little bit easier for us than it is to use words. That's right. Why we do it a lot of the time. So trying to find the words and make sense of the paintings and kind of what's been connecting them these last 3 years, and even prior to starting here at the program. So I've just been I keep going back to contrast. I keep going back to these being like encounters and experiences, and they've just gotten bigger and bigger, especially with this notion of like non-objective space that I've been
do more,
contemplating
care less. Now, is this your motto?
Yeah, I think it was actually something Kyle Trowbridge said to me one day.
Oh!
I needed to write down and remind myself.
Actually, this is very Kyle, so I can see it.
It is very Kyle. Yeah, so when he said it to me one day, I'm like, I should write this down on a day that I need it, because I find the paintings get bad when I start to care too much about them.
Right.
I love them most when I don't care about them.
It's to let go. Now, you work large.
Yeah.
Is that your preference?
I do now. Yeah, I actually have a painting that this was work that I applied with to the program.
Oh my gosh. Let me see here.
I think it's 8x8. Yeah. This is the work that I applied with. Little scale of reference there.
Yes.
And so the things that I'm interested in have kind of remained the same. I still have these like washy, almost atmospheric fields of color with like these non-objective forms just kind of interacting within them.
Yeah.
But they were really timid, and they were small. Part of it was because I didn't have a big studio space at home. I would rinse my brushes out in my bathroom sink. So I didn't have a space to work, but I also didn't really know what I was doing, because I didn't start painting non-objectively until 2013. So it was my last year of my undergrad program.
So is this your passion in terms of abstract?
Yeah,
yes.
My non-objective work is definitely,
yes.
I do, like, I just love the paint itself and like the qualities of paint, and I love color, and I love light, and this idea of making a space that isn't actually space because it's on a flat canvas. So the interest was always there.
Right.
And I always had envisioned them bigger. Like, I've always been drawn to Mark Rothko's.
Yes.
And the spiritual of Mark Rothko. Jules Alitzky is another one I just love, like actual atmosphere of color. And I was like awestruck when I would see them in person. but I guess I never really thought I could do it myself.
No, I'm curious, is there a particular color you gravitate towards?
And now I'm
Or is it just something?
Yeah, no, I know. It's so funny because I try to tell myself I'm not going to repeat color palettes. I don't want myself to start latching to a color palette just because it works. Yeah. So I've been trying to step away from certain colors, but there are ones I always go back to. Pink being number one. It's just a happy color.
It is.
You know, I really like using bright pinks. I have this electric jade.
Gosh,
that I've just started making. So so I actually pre-mix all of my colors now. And it's just the most beautiful color. And I put them in these little Tupperwares.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that pretty?
Wow.
So it's not teal per se, because I put some green gold in it.
No,
and I always write myself the colors that I use so that even if I can't make it exactly the same again, I at least have an idea.
You have an idea how you got there.
Because I'm like, okay, if I keep going back to trying to make the same color over and over and over again, I should probably just make it so that I can use it whenever the painting calls for it.
Now, talk to me about your setup, because this little section here.
Yeah. Well, I had to try and get as much wall space as possible. So what I did is I shoved everything that isn't work that I'm working on onto a single wall space. Okay. So it's a little awkward when you walk in. I have desk, paints, mini fridge, library all together. But yeah, and of course I have to color coordinate my paints.
Your paints. Now, is there a brand that you like the most?
Can you tell? I wonder. Yeah. So I'm a golden brat. I really am. And you can make with anything. You really can. I mean, I buy Blick and Utrecht brand too, it's just as good. But I have this like emotional attachment to golden. So when I was in undergrad, I actually interned at the Robert Rauschenberg Residency.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. In Captiva. Yeah. So they were looking for an intern to essentially document his paints. Like the paints that he used to paint.
Just that alone. My gosh.
So the idea of doing that alone, they're like, hey, would you be interested in this project? I found their phone number randomly on the internet. They're like, how'd you even get this number? And then they called me back a couple weeks later and were like, we're actually looking for an intern to document his paints. So I got to imagine this times like a million. And I got to actually document his paints that he painted with in his house on Captiva Island. I would commute an hour and a half every day just to do it. And he
Jealous.
I know. He only used golden. So then when I started using these, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the luminosity of them.
So like now you see like
now
the magic.
I see it. Yeah. Like, there's no way you can justify buying a certain brand you can make with anything, but I found creative ways to extend the life of them. So before it started out with just red, yellow, blue, because I was an undergrad and pinching pennies.
I could see lots of blue.
Oh my gosh, so much red, yellow, and blue so that I could make my own. And they tend to be a little bit cheaper depending on what you're buying. But now I just extend it with white, which is actually I think something Kyle does too. He buys like white house paint. Mine's pretty similar. This is probably about the same as a gallon of house paint, just Blick acrylic. So I get white in bulk and affordable, and then I'll mix it with gesso or gel medium. I'll dilute it with water. If I'm going for something a little more translucent, this is another one that I love, is Liquitex Glazing medium. So it essentially gets you the same color but like a thin washed layer without having to water it down. So it's this like beautiful, I use it in this one over here, this beautiful like almost glossy sheen, so you can create all this history underneath it with acrylic.
Yes, the camera's
and then just layer over it with this beautiful glaze to unify it. It's so fun. So I use a little bit of everything, really. Golden is definitely my go-to for colors, like the actual paintings. But when I've been drawing into them too, I've actually started using paint markers and oil pigment. And I know it's kind of taboo.
I know that you do use oil pigment sticks.
Taboo. They're like, oh my gosh.
But why is that?
They just have a different quality. And you can kind of see it in this one here. There's a difference between a painted mark and a drawn mark, right? And so when I first started drawing into these pieces again, I was using pastel, like chalk pastel, which just, it doesn't last. There's no way it's gonna, last the test of time. So I started saying, how can I get this like hand-drawn mark? This like broken, sketchy mark without pastel. And someone recommended, I wish I could remember who, recommended the oil pigment stick. So you get this beautiful, this is oil pigment stick. And I try to avoid doing it till the end so that the oil sits on top of the acrylic rather than the acrylic sitting on top of the oil, because that's when the issues start, is when you try to paint acrylic paint over oil. It'll repel it, and it just doesn't really last the test of time. But I'm trying not to think about them lasting the test of time because it's process-oriented work. And I'm trying to be in the present. So,
now, when you take on projects, do you just do one, or you take on multiple?
Oh, I gotta do multiple.
You have to do multiple.
I have to. Before I didn't, and I was really determined to just kind of make it work. You know, I'm like, this is the painting I'm gonna go into the studio today and tackle, and I'm gonna resolve it, and it's gonna come out fabulous. And so I spend the whole day working on that painting, and about 3-4 hours in, I'm getting frustrated with it, and it's asking me metaphorically to step away, and I'm like, no, I have to make it work, and I end up destroying it. So I've noticed for my own sanity, it helps to work on multiple paintings. Yeah, because once I start kind of exhausting one for the day, where I sit back and I spend more time looking at it than I do actually working on it, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to leave it for a few days and sit on it and work on something else. So then I'll work on a different one instead.
Right. Now, just from what I've seen from you, you are definitely a type of artist that you're not afraid to experiment, and you use several tools.
Yeah.
I've seen you use foam.
Yeah.
You use
anything that makes
Swiffers.
a cool mark. Yeah, anything that uses a cool mark. So I have favorites. I won't show you this one because it doesn't have history yet. We'll talk about that after. That's
it's like a kid in a candy store.
This is a new find. I know, it really is. Home Depot, I feel like a kid in a candy store. So this is actually an edging tool. So Frankenthaler actually used these. Yes. And the only reason I figured out that she used these is from photographs of her working in her studio. And I was like, what is this tool that she's using? I don't go to Home Depot. I'm not the most savvy when it comes to home improvements. So I don't spend a lot of time there. And I discovered it was an edging tool. And so I went and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what she uses. And you can buy them in all different sizes, and they just hold the paint. So a lot of times with squeegees, you kind of get this broken mark where in the middle you can still see whatever was underneath it.
Yeah.
This just like soaks up the paint like a paintbrush would. And you can make these beautiful giant marks. Like you can just get a nice big one. And this is a small one too. I use grout laying tools. Those are nice because they have a handle on them. Yeah, so if I'm working on the floor that day, this really helps with spreading paint out and still kind of giving a texture to it also. This little guy's fun. I got him, I think, from TJ Maxx. Turkey baster.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's used for, I don't know, putting juices on a turkey or something. Yeah,
now, well, what do you think of the marks?
Oh, it's weird. It's like a scumbled mark. It's definitely one I use towards the end because it's smaller and a little funkier.
And this is a brush?
Yeah, I found this. This is a recent find at Home Depot too. I don't know what you're supposed to use it for. Probably cleaning a toilet or something. A Gong Brush. So this one's fun. And it gives me a nice healthy distance from the painting too. Sometimes I notice if I work a little too close to it, I start to get precious and fall in love with it. So if I need some healthy distance from it, that's why I have all the ones on the poles and the sticks over here too.
Now, you use extension rods.
Yeah. And
now, how do you find that works for you? That it just helps in terms of distance and...
Distance. Healthy distance is what I like to call it. So... And the nice thing about them is you can really, I didn't even know this until recently, you can attach anything to the end of an extension pole. You can put a roller on the end of here. You can put a mop on the end of here. I found this giant push broom that you can screw on there. And then this too, my new favorite tool, can screw on there too. This is like I think it's called a lamb's wool. It's technically for like finishing floors. I didn't show you my dirty one because I let paint sit on it for a little too long. But this is the pretty new one. And it screws right in. And it just gives you the healthy distance that you need from it. And it's also that element of surprise and control that you're kind of giving up to the painting.
Yes.
So I noticed, like, as an artist, we spend all this time developing our practice of control. I need to be able to control my materials and control the composition. And the nature of this is the exact opposite, actually. So I have to distance myself just so I care less and that I kind of get something unexpected happening that I'm not able to control. And then I can respond to it afterwards.
So I always like to ask this to painters, when do you know it's finished?
Never.
Never.
It's never finished.
It's never finished.
That's actually these 3 paintings paintings are all old paintings that I have painted over and revisited.
Okay, I want to know about these.
So I think this one I actually started last year, and there are only moments where you can kind of see what was behind it. This was part of the original painting. I think this part was the original painting. And it's so funny because most artists, they say this too, when they're asked what their favorite painting is, it's usually the last one they've done. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
Last painting you've done. And so once I spend some time away from it, I come back to the old ones, I'm like, oh, he's not that good anymore. So then I go and I paint over them. And it actually gives it a really nice history. I'd argue the paintings that I paint over that were older paintings I wasn't a fan of tend to come out more successful because of the history that's underneath them. So you're getting the evidence of these layers, of these little moments that were happening early on in the stage. You can never get these soft atmospheric areas ever again the same way once you put too much paint on there.
Oh gosh, I see it.
So it's, and the texture of the canvas is even different there too. It's great. You can feel like the grit, because I prime my own canvas. So I do like half gesso, half water, so you can still kind of get the texture of canvas on there too. So yeah, it's fun, but they're never finished.
And this one?
Yep, this one too is also an old one that I started, I think, in the spring. I want to say I did this around February of this past year. And I was really happy with it, and then I came in one day and put a giant mark on it, and then I hated it. So I rolled it up and put it aside for a couple months. And then now that I've had some healthy distance from it, I've had the courage and enthusiasm to go back and dig back into it.
So like revisiting it.
Yeah, we're revisiting all three of these in my studio.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm happy you came in on a week where I didn't despise everything on my wall.
No, it looks amazing.
It depends on the week. They're definitely not finished yet, but they're closer than they were before. So, yeah. I mean, people that don't work into their old paintings, aka myself before I came to school here, I don't know how I did it. The visual history it adds is just uncomparable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that, do you look up to certain artists and inspiration? Like, what moves you when you're in the studio? I want to know if there's a ritual.
So
do you listen to music?
It's definitely a ritual. I have to listen to music. If I'm not listening to music, then I don't know what I'm doing. I'm silent in my head with my thoughts. But yeah, usually I'll come in and I actually start on the computer. So I'll pull up things that are going to get me excited that day.
Yeah.
Like either paintings that I've seen before or artists that I just discovered, and I'm like trying to figure out what's working in their paintings that's not working in my paintings. And I'll just look through and be like, what did they do? What did they do? Which can get unhealthy at times if I spend too much time looking at their work.
But you need research.
I look up work that gets me excited. I look up paintings that have colors that get me excited. I look up stuff that I just am like, what am I going to try today? And I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try this using this color instead. And so I'll usually start looking up pictures that get me excited. And then I'll kind of decide on if I'm starting a new painting that day, I'll decide on a color palette. And mixing colors probably takes the longest, because now I mix all of my own colors. I've gotten very particular about what colors I want to use in my paintings. So, I mean, I'll easily spend the first 1 or 2 hours of my day on a new painting just making colors.
Right.
It's like a recipe. You're trying to find the perfect recipe.
The perfect description I've heard.
You're trying to find the perfect recipe of the color you want. And I'm like, oh, I could really use a little more green gold. I'm like, oh, but now it's too much on the yellow side. I guess it needs to add more ultramarine. And I'll just sit there and make colors for an hour and a half. And then you also have to consider the medium. I want it to be fluid, because a lot of these sometimes I'll soak stain like Frankenthaler did. So if they can't bleed into one another, soak into the canvas, then it's not the right consistency.
When you make your own paint, do you name yours?
I do now. I never used to, but I notice I'm using these colors so much. So I have Electric Jade.
Yeah.
And then I see
Sherbet right over here.
Yes, I have Sherbet Orange, which is a recent fave.
Oh, wow.
I love Sherbet Orange. I have Barbie Pink over here. Doesn't get more Barbie pink than that.
No, that is a Barbie pink.
I know, it's beautiful.
Oh gosh, it's like
it's
like ice cream. It's like sherbet.
And then I actually, what I've started doing to be cost effective, I have a color that I love called Titan Green Pale. Of course, it's covered with my paint. Titan Green Pale. And it's fairly expensive. So to save money, I actually made a mock Titan green paint. So I'm like, okay, I use this color a lot because it's light, and I use it in bulk, and I use it to cancel a decent amount. So it's not exact, but it's pretty stinking close.
That's a very unique color.
It's pretty. Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Because it has a little gray.
Yeah, it's like a grayish greenish color. Because I feel like I was addicted to white for a while to just kind of cancel and cover things up. So I've been wanting to use lighter colors that aren't white but activate the surface the same way that white does. So I'll use this beautiful pastel yellow too is another one that I love.
Oh God, nail polish that color.
Yeah, right? I know. So this will be a light color. I'll use I made a mock Titan buff too, so that I can do this one on a larger scale. It's also a golden color that I'm just trying to make my own version of.
You are truly a painter.
Yes, and I can use them whenever I want. I don't have to go out and repurchase.
I love
thrifty.
this.
I try to be thrifty.
Well, I gotta ask about the pandemic and how it affected you. Do you think it affected your work? Do you think that, I don't know, did it make you just focus more? Because I talked to some artists, and some artists, no, nothing's changed. I'm still doing what I need to do. Like, oh wow. But I know it's hard for everyone. So I'm just curious about your experience.
Yeah, I'd argue that my paintings wouldn't be this way, and I wouldn't appreciate them to the extent that I do, or have the courage to work on paintings like this had the pandemic not happened. So
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, my work wouldn't be where it was had it not happened. So I got accepted into UM as a painter, and my entire first year, that's when the pandemic happened, right? It was,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I started in the fall of 2019, and then I was also taking printmaking at the time, and I want to say it was February. It was right before the pandemic started. I had just learned how to silk screen. So I dabble in printmaking. I'm definitely not like a professional printmaker, but it's a lot like painting. And so Lisa, one of my professors, wanted to show me how to silk screen because she knew I'd enjoy it.
At least draw us head of the area for making.
And so I pulled like 7 or 8 prints that were really interesting. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like painting on the silk screen, and then the university shut down.
God.
Like literally a matter of days later, I think I went to the studio, like it was like a spring break or close to it, and classes weren't held that day, and she's like, I would take some stuff home just in case. So I grabbed
and
my
in
prints.
Case turn into
till fall. I was gone for the rest of the semester, my first year of grad school, and so I brought whatever I could fit in my car. Obviously not these, they weren't this big yet, but still I brought a lot of painted prints. I'm like, okay, I can definitely fit paper into my 800 square foot apartment. And then I brought 1 sheet of plywood that I had been stapling canvases to and working on plywood, because I liked that I could put it on the floor and work on it flat, and it still had a hard surface to work on, and it was stretched, and then I could prop it up and lean it up against the wall, and it could drip and kind of interact with gravity. So I brought home 1 sheet of plywood that was like some random measurement, probably like 38 3/4 by like 47.62. And so all my paintings were that size during the pandemic. It was the only sheet of wood that I had to work on. And I didn't have everything, so I had to start drawing into them. Well, I didn't have to. I felt compelled to start drawing into them. Because I'm like, I have these silk screens that aren't finished, and I don't have a press or anything that relative to printmaking that I could use to work back into them. So I had chalk markers, and I had Sharpies, and I had colored pencil, and I had some of my paints, and I just started drawing into these prints and painting into these prints, which I had done before, but not to that extent.
But no moment did it occur to you that you had to pause.
No.
You needed to keep going.
Yeah, no, and they were smaller too, so I feel like they were a little less intimidating, but there was this urgency to make something because I didn't have access to my studio anymore. And I didn't have access to my peers, and I didn't have access to my professors, where I was literally essentially growing. My work was developing because of my interactions with them, and I couldn't interact with anyone. So I did a lot of painted prints, and then I'm like, why am I not doing this on my canvas? Like, why would I not draw into my paintings too? I kept them very separate in my mind. So from there, I'm like, okay, how can I draw into these canvases? So I started with the chalk pastel, and I'm like, this isn't gonna last. I found the oil pastel. I'm like, well, I should just get chunky paint markers so I can draw into them with actual paint and not worry about it getting ruined or destroyed over time. So yeah, I mean, my work is mixed media because of the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
I wouldn't have gotten there. And it's funny because the prints, I notice sometimes I'm actually more excited about than the paintings because I don't care as much about them. Do more, care less, right? And they actually got into a museum show during COVID.
Congratulations.
Like a digital show. Well, I know, and I was shocked because they were my prints. And these are just things that I was playing around with at home.
You never know.
I know, you really don't. And it's funny because the most discoveries happen in those prints, and they've only informed my paintings for the better now. So my goal, here's a couple of them. Actually.
Show me.
I tried to archive them so I can go back, but these are all silkscreen prints. And they're mixed media. So I start out with actually drawing into the screen. These faint lines that you see here are washable marker. And so I'll start with marker and I'll mist it and I'll lay different layers of ink on it. Yeah. And then sometimes I'll lift up the screen and I'll mist it with a water bottle. So I'll get this nice washed watercolor effect. And then I'll go back and draw into them. I'll go back with the marker later. I'm glad that I have kind of integrated drawing into the process rather than it being a last step. Okay, I'm going to draw on it now. So I'll draw and I'll paint. And I'll draw and I'll paint. And I'll draw and I'll paint. And they just kind of build up on top of each other. Yeah.
And how do you find that printmaking is just influenced paint in that way? That it's now become almost part of it?
Yeah.
In terms of mixed media?
Of course. I mean, one thing that I think that printmaking has that painting doesn't, and I think a lot of artists do this, there's this self-inflicted pressure we put on ourselves when we're looking at a blank canvas.
Right.
Not a piece of paper. Anyone has a notepad full of paper.
Right.
Paper's disposable. If you don't do well, you can tear yourself another sheet.
But a canvas, oh
my gosh, we worship blank canvases.
Just in the mind, it's just so much more special.
Self-inflicted magic that's supposed to happen on it, and you're responsible for making that happen. And if you do poorly, then you're like, oh my gosh, am I an artist? So I started painting on paper actually to kind of psych myself out. So I started making paintings on paper because I'm like, all right, if I'm doing them on a small scale, I'll do them on a big scale too. But yeah, I also had a healthy handicap. Is the best word I can come up for it with silkscreen, because I'm literally putting a screen between myself and the image.
Right.
I'm not going up to this daunting blank canvas and what am I going to do? This first mark is going to dictate whatever happens here forward. So it was nice that I didn't really know what was going to happen, and then I had a physical screen kind of blocking me from the paper because there was the element of surprise. I didn't know what was going to happen once I pulled the squeegee. So I'm trying to take all of those chance occurrences and discoveries that I made in printmaking and get them to translate to my large scale paintings.
Right.
Yeah, because they're these fun, I call them little environments. These non-objective environments where I almost kind of personify these marks. They have their own little personalities and silly voices in my mind. And they're all just kind of interacting with one another in these non-objective spaces.
I have to say, I love the green with that pink.
The Pepto-Bismol pink with green gold, and then the deep forest green and a little bit of that sherbet orange.
I'm obsessed.
This is one of my favorite ones. I know. And so it's funny because I gravitate towards the prints and I'm like, now how do I make this happen in my paintings?
In a larger
scale. Because I want to interact with these little personified marks, and I can't. They're just so little. I want to crawl inside the print and interact with them. So this is me trying to replicate that on a bigger scale.
Now, can you tell me about your bulletin board?
Oh, yeah. Again, the most type A painter you're ever going to meet. So it's even alphabetized. That's hilarious. I just did that this year. So I collect artists, and I take names on and off. That's why it's dry erase. Sometimes I outgrow the paintings or I'm not as drawn to them anymore, but it's a mixture of contemporaries, but a lot of abexers, first and second generation abexers. So you got both de Koonings on there.
Klein.
Yeah, obviously Franz Klein. Have you heard of František Kupka?
I have not.
I hadn't either. He shared a studio with Helen Frankenthaler.
What?
Yeah. I just
See,
discovered
the first time
him
I
this
heard
year.
of it, and of course Helen, because
of course
she's
not. I know.
amazing.
And so I found
So
him.
amazing.
I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I have a couple that are contemporaries. I'm going to butcher her last name, Jade Fado-Giutini. She's my age.
Never heard. What?
Yeah, she's my age, and she's like in various collections in England, and she's like a contemporary abexer. They're very intricate, interesting paintings. And then Jason Craighead, he does a lot of drawing into his work.
Okay, I need to screenshot this later.
You do,
and do some
I know.
research.
I did too. I have it on
Guys,
my phone too, so I wouldn't lose it. Arshile Gorky.
Guys, you know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I have my little collection of people, and so some days I'm like, all right, who am I feeling? Who do I want to channel today? Do I want to channel the scrawls of Cy Twombly? Do I want to channel my Mary Weatherford and do some giant washed marks with brooms and mops? So
Yes.
It depends on the day, honestly.
And this?
Yeah. Well, these are just articles that I collect. Actually, Amy Schislow gave me this one too, one of my professors. So I just find articles that pertain to anything that I'm kind of contemplating about the work at that time. I gave myself a little painters you should know sheet, and every time I found someone I recognized or never heard of, I went through. I like to collect things. Yes. I like to collect new painters, things I hadn't known yet. I have my little mini Frankenthalers up there for inspiration.
Oh, they're amazing. Look at that blue.
I know. It's that deep, like, indigo color is stunning.
I'm obsessed with that color.
Yeah.
Any painting with that color, please.
Yeah. But I also have, like, little random things. I have, like, fortune cookies that I saved. I have, like, a napkin I saved in Italy when I went there. It's just... I love collecting things that have value.
Now, is this...
No, that's
like
not me.
Palette?
That's actually Christine.
That's Christine?
Pistole's painting. It's a print she wanted to throw out.
Okay, I would have never guessed.
That's Christine's painting, or print, technically. And
I would have never guessed.
I was like, don't you dare throw that out. Can I please have this? Because her use of fluorescents are just magnificent.
You know, like, I just love looking at palettes themselves.
Yeah,
because it becomes a work of art.
Yeah.
And that's what this reminds me of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually one of Christine's.
I would have never guessed.
Oh, I can't wait for her to see this. So she can see how much I admire and worship it.
Oh my gosh, look at that purple.
I know, yeah. So I just collect lots of little things.
Now, because you are third year, can you tell me about your time in the program?
Yeah.
Anything that... I just want to know, like, what are you leaving with? Like, what are you going to walk away here with? Because that's important.
Yeah. It's a lot to process, too.
Because I'm sure every professor taught you something different.
They did. And this is a strong... I call UM, like, the hidden gem of art programs. So I applied to so many different MFA programs, and
why this one?
So at this point I actually decided I wanted to stay in Florida. For a while I was looking at programs out of state, and I was kind of established myself down here. I'm almost 30. I'm like, this is my home. A lot of my work is really influenced by the colors around here. I'm like, okay, so if I'm gonna go back to school and get my MFA, I want to do it in Florida. And actually a previous printmaking professor of mine from my undergrad sent me an email and said, just FYI, they have TA positions here. Uh-huh. And so I came and I looked at the campus and I applied on a whim. I was teaching art for 5 years, like salary position at an A school, teaching art. And I quit my job at 27 to go back to school. And it was probably one of the scariest things I ever did. I could have easily stayed at that school until I retired. But my paintings weren't where they needed to be. And all of these things that I've been, like, fascinated by these, like, masters that I worshipped, it just felt like this unattainable thing that I could never really do. Yeah. And so now that I've had, like, the space and the community of people that I needed to, like, actually make this work, and the right people to encourage me to, like, make these bold choices, these experimental choices for my work, I mean, I'm leaving with stuff I can't even put words to. It's crazy. And I tend to get very sentimental thinking about it. Oh no. Yeah. I'm definitely attached to the work itself, even the paintings I don't like, just because of the history that they've kind of built being here at UM.
Yeah.
And being in the hallway with all of these other painters. I know we don't see that, but we have I have one of my awesome professors, Gerardo, that I share a wall with.
We love him.
I know, we love Gerardo. And then Amy Schissel's office is down the way. And then I've got photographers around me, and I've got fellow painters around me. And it's nice to be around a community of people that also like to make things.
Well, it's also like a hippie commune for artists.
It is.
In a way,
it is.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I acquaint myself with people from all walks of life, but usually not artists. I tended to only kind of be the only artist that I knew. And so it's so nice to be around like-minded people that are interested in the same things that I'm interested in, and that can just kind of pop in and be like, oh, this one's nice, this one's working, or oh, what are you doing with this one? And I can pop into theirs, and I don't know anything about photography.
It's just the feedback, you think?
The feedback is wonderful, and it's just an energy of people that are looking to grow and develop their practice, and they're all put in the same space. I love that environment of just being around other people that are as eager to make good work, as I am, because they're just as enthusiastic about it as I am.
Now, what will you tell someone that's an undergrad looking to come into the program? Is there any advice you would give? Is there tips, tricks? I mean, anything at all?
It is what you make it. So if you want to close your studio door and hide away in your studio door and just focus on your work, you can do that. Mm-hmm. But I highly encourage you to keep your door open some days, because that's the only way that I got to meet all these super interesting people that have given me the feedback that's caused my work to kind of go in this direction. So take advantage of everything, including the people that surround you while you're here, because I mean, it's 3 years. It goes by fast. I feel like I started
I just feel like you just got here.
Yeah, I feel like I literally just got here, and I blinked and now I'm graduating. And had I not kept my door open or introduced myself to people I had never met before, or walked into photographers' studios or sculptors' studios and seen the work that they're doing, the work wouldn't have been what it is. It's just everything happens for a reason, and it's all connected. So you got to take advantage of everything. If you're not taking advantage of everything it has to offer you, then why are you here,
Yeah.
You got to take advantage of all the resources, because, I mean, this is a hidden gem program.
Now, you are working on your thesis.
I am.
Okay, so no spoilers, because I'm not gonna, no. But can you just tell me a little about the process itself?
Sure.
What are your, what you're learning, what you're like, okay, I have to go back into the drawing board, or just inspirations, anything that you could tell us about the thesis and your vision on this show, because it's a big deal. You have to defend it. It's literal.
If I want to graduate. So, and that's maybe another piece of advice I'd give them too. I've been collecting information all 3 years that I've been here. So the notes that you see on my door, or the artists that you see up here, these are all things that I've been building upon and collecting. So it's not like I'm just starting new this year and being like, okay, what am I going to write my thesis about? The answer definitely lies in the work, but I would try to relate everything you possibly can, even classes that you don't think are related. I'm taking an Islamic art history class, and I'm still finding a way to parallel it to the abstract expressionist kind of reinvigoration that I'm doing here. But yeah, and just, all right, I don't want to give too much away, but it's going to be a couple large scale paintings, maybe just a few, and they may or may not be aware of their surroundings. I don't know if that's too ambiguous, but I'm not reinventing a wheel. I'm recontextualizing abstract expressionism and what it means to be a painter today,
right?
In a totally different era than the second generation Abexers were. I worship Frankenthaler, but we're in a different time now, and I'm making work that's reminiscent of her, but it's not hers at the same time.
At the same time.
Just kind of trying to reestablish what that means to be a painter today, when you don't have to paint,
Well, what's next for you? What do you, at least where do you see yourself in
what
5 years?
Intimidating
That
question. Really? Definitely teaching. So I can't not teach. I'm always going to be a painter. But when I graduate, I'd love to keep teaching and sharing how enthusiastic I am about painting with my students. And then, maybe I end up in a gallery somewhere. Maybe I don't. But I'm going to I'm going to be working regardless. I can't. I'm sure you know what I mean when I say this, and you've heard this a lot from painters, that like you're almost anxious and don't feel like yourself when you're not painting. Like, have you ever?
Well, that's the thing. It's just you have to do it. You do it because you have to do it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna be painting. I feel like that's the part that's given. But in regards to like what am I gonna do after I graduate here, I'm gonna hopefully keep teaching. Maybe find a professor position somewhere. That would be awesome. Hopefully stay connected with all of you wonderful people.
Of course.
Just keep making stuff.
Aw.
Yeah.
So, final, okay? Just to close on a personal note.
Sure.
I'm going to be very sad to see you go next semester.
Don't make me cry. Okay.
No, well, I'm learning more and more. There's not a lot of genuinely authentic people, and I see you and your positivity and what you've brought to the program. You always put your head down. You're covered in paint.
Yeah, it was a good day, huh?
The passion you bring to your work and to the program it's infectious. So you're such an asset, and I want to thank you so much.
Thank you
for taking the time to show us today, like just show us around and speak to us, because I've had so much fun.
Me too. I'm so glad you came.
I had so much fun.
Yeah, and then hopefully these will look a little different once they're stretched in on that white gallery wall on May 21st.
That's right. Now, we're going to definitely be posting all that information on your show.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If you guys have questions at all for Jess, please leave them in a comment, and we will definitely get back to you. Sure. Any questions at all. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Millie. I'm glad you came.
Bye.
Bye.